warns us. Starting in verse 6, he says, "Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them." It says, do not let anyone deceive you with empty words. Ladies, especially, you know what? You may even be dating a Christian young man, because here's the thing. I was a Christian young man. I was that guy. I love Jesus. In fact, your mom's probably been like, "Hey, why don't you go hang out and date that Chad Hampton boy? He loves Jesus. He's at church. He's sweet." You know what? Moms trusted me way too much in high school. I would take girls out and be like, "What time do I need to have them home?" Because I had a curfew. "Oh, Chad, it's there with you." You know what? They don't have a curfew. We know that you're good. That is a bad idea, parents. Okay, all the way around. Because here's the thing. I made mistakes with their daughters on dates. I did. And I loved Jesus. I had a mad love for Jesus, so I thought. But in the midst of me not allowing God to define lines in my life, I crossed lines that I wish I hadn't crossed. I did things that I wish I hadn't done. And in the midst of that, I would convince girls that we should redefine this line. I did. Am I proud of it? Absolutely not. Am I ashamed of it? You bet. But it's the truth. So you can't just falsely in a relationship saying, "Well, they're a Christian, so you know what? I just got to believe what they say." And guys, it's the same way the girls might do that for you. They might say, "You know what, Jonathan, it's not that big a deal. You know what? You love me, don't you, Jonathan? You think I'm cute, right?" And Jonathan's going to be like, "Yeah, baby, you know, I think you're cute, you know, what's up, you know?" And he's like, "But you know what? We need to be strong. You know, God defined this line." She's like, "But Jonathan, I mean, really, do you think that line's for everybody? Like, you know, that's just a good general standard, but, you know." Then Jonathan begins to think, because he's a guy. It's like, whoa, you know, what's going on? And he's thinking back to what mom and dad have taught, to what Chad has taught, to what the Bible says, and he's like, he's got this conflict, but here's the beautiful thing. Because of tonight and because of parents opening this dialogue, Jonathan can say, "You know what? There is a line and it can't be redefined. There is a line, no ands, ifs, or buts about it. So if you want to redefine the line, I'm gone. If you're tempted to redefine the line, I'm just going to go hang out at home." And so culture wants us to redefine the line. And God gives us these lines, y'all, for safety. Last night, one of mine and Brittany's good friends, or Patrick and Catherine McKinney, are moving to Ireland in a couple weeks. And so last night, Brittany and her friend Jonna and Catherine went out for a girls' night and left us husbands with the babies at home. So it was awesome for me and Cooper. When it's just me and Cooper, I don't cook, and so we go to Chick-fil-A. That's what we do. And last night I got a 2-for-1. I got to see Becca and I got to see Morgan. They were both working last night, so it was doubly awesome. And so we get there and we're sitting there and I'm feeding Cooper his chicken and he's enjoying it and he's like going to share with me. And when I go to get some, he pulls it away and like laughs at me. He thinks it's funny, you know, like, "Hey, I'm sharing, Dad." Not really, haha, joke's on you. You know, he's his father's son. And so, but as we were there, there was this other mom that showed up with 2 little boys. They sat right next to us. And so, you know, we're trying to teach Cooper boundaries now. You know, there's certain places you go, certain places you don't go. There's certain people that you go and talk to. They're called friends. You can go and, you know, interact with them freely. But if there's a stranger, you're nice to them, you smile, you're polite, but you don't cross these boundaries. Well, apparently this mother hadn't had this conversation with her children. And so this one kid, and like, okay, I wanted to knock him out in the love of Christ, okay? This kid comes up, and he's just like all up in our business, okay? And he's like all up in Cooper's face, okay? He's like, "Hey, baby, hey, baby." And he's like turning around and looking at his mom like, "Look at the baby." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my baby. Your baby's over there," you know? And he's like, "How old is your baby?" And I'm being nice, you know, because I'm a Christian, I'm supposed to, you know. And so I tell him, I'm like, "Well, he's about to turn 1." And he's like, "My baby's older." And I'm like, "Who cares?" You know. And so, but the kid's 3, okay? I'm having this conversation with a 3-year-old. And so, but this kid just keeps on, and he's like he's got junk all over his hands and he's rubbing it on Cooper. And I'm like, "Do you have swine flu or something?" You know, like, because the kid's like coughing and sneezing. And I'm like, "Come on." And I'm wanting to look at them. And I even look at the mom a couple times, like, "Are you letting this happen?" You know, and she's like that. And then like he goes off. And then like the mom just tries to explain herself to me. I'm sitting there with Cooper and her kids are off doing, she had apparently no boundaries for this lady. They're somewhere, nowhere to be found. And she's telling me, she's like, "Yeah." She's like, is that your first one? And I was like, yeah, it is. And she's like, oh, with the second one, you just lose control. And I'm like, really? That's the rule? Like, you have number 2, and it's just over. You just stop. And so, and I wanted to say, and so you're telling me that number 1 is the angel, because I'm liking number 2. Number 1 is the one all up in my grill. And so, but she's like telling me all this, and I'm seeing this, and you know what? If Cooper gets sick in the next few days, I'm going to go find that woman and say, pay for all his medical bills, and I'm going to go beat down that kid that was sick all up in his grill, because I'm like, he needs to know boundaries, okay? You need to teach boundaries, okay? I'm not really going to do that, okay? I wish I could, but I can't. Not because I'm a Christian, but because I would get arrested. And so, but as I think about that story, and as the boundaries that I wish had been in place for those kids weren't in place, they brought harm into my area. And when you and I don't practice the boundaries that Christ has laid out for us in the area of sexual purity, we begin to tarnish other people's areas. We begin to take things that aren't ours. We begin to cause hurt that's unnecessary. And so for you and I, it's important to recognize that Christ gives us his boundaries so we can live life to the full. He says, I've got a plan that's good. I've got a plan where you don't have to experience shame, where you don't have to experience guilt, where you don't have to tell stories to people that you pour into and you love and you want to help make them more like Christ, and have to tell them where you've fallen short in your life because you were just a little bit stupid. See, that happens when you and I redefine the lines. When we try to move the God-given boundaries we have to make it more convenient for us. And so as we come toward the end of this, we find some pretty powerful teaching from Paul, starting in verse 8. Tells us this, and this is a letter written to believers. It says, for at one time you were in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. And then if you would, just jump down with me to verse number 15. It says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Ultimately, once we allow God to define the lines, he's given us the pattern of how to love. He's defined lines. We realize that we don't need to redefine these lines. We get to a point of coming back to the beginning and asking God what he wants. At the end of the day, it comes down to you and I asking God, what do you want? What do you want for me in the realm of sexual purity, God? What do you want? What is your plan for sexual purity for my life? What is your plan for this relationship that I'm in, God? What's your plan for me beyond this year? What's your plan for me beyond this month? What's your plan for me beyond this day? God, what do you want for me? Because when we ask that question, it takes us back to the beginning. God says, I want you to love as I love. I want you to be an imitator of me. And as I look at Cooper, he turns a year old Friday. 1 year old. It's nuts. You know, Brittany, we were at Jason's Deli eating before we got started, and she was like, did you know that like a year ago tonight we were at a Jason's Deli? And I'm like, we were? She's like, yes, don't you remember my mom was here? It was the night before we were going to the hospital. And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, but it wasn't this one. And she's like, I know it wasn't this one, but we were at a Jason's Deli. And I just think about how Cooper has just kind of, he's growing up and he's changing and he's doing all these different things. And it's really cool how at 1 year old he's not talking. He's starting to take a couple steps by himself now, but even looking at him, he's kind of taken on different nuances that Brittany and I have. You know, you just see different aspects of him in us, and the reason he does it, he's our child, and he's going to take on our nature just like parents